Welcome to SV Union High School and Junior College, Pune. Children, I am Deepa Fadke. We will be learning about Standard 9th 4.1 poem. Please listen. The poet is anonymous. The name of the poet is not mentioned here. So let's begin learning about glossary. Let's learn the glossary words. Convince means to persuade or assure. Faltering is weak and lacking confidence. Inadequacy means lacking capability. Irrational means illogical without any reason or base. Trampling means to step heavily on something and crush it. There is a stanza which says, advice is cheap, 20 cents will get you both Dear Abby and Billy Graham in the same newspaper. So children, here you need to learn about the newspaper where the column is especially preferred for giving some advices, for seeking some advices. So here the poet says the advice is so cheap that you will get it 20 cents. On 20 cents, you just have to give 20 cents and you will get the advice by Dear Abby and Billy Graham. Now children, here you need to learn one more thing, that there is a piece of advice that is always given and that is published in a particular page in the newspaper. So here advice is given on the questions that are given by the readers. Actually children, if you see Marathi newspaper or even English newspapers, you will see that there are some columns which are intentionally kept for the problems of the readers. So readers can send, people can send they write their problems over there and the columnists offer advice. So you can see if your local papers also have that. So here children, we need to understand one more thing, that Abby, Dear Abby and Billy Graham, these people actually are they have worked as preachers. So they preached the people through their advices. So we can understand it over here with this reference of the newspapers. Let's start reading the poem. Please listen. When I ask you to listen to me and you start giving me advice, you have not done what I asked. When I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you are trampling on my feelings. So children, the poem, please listen. It tells us about the importance of listening. Many a times we jump onto conclusions and we are not ready to listen. So here this poem tells us that it is important to listen first and then frame your own ideas or opinion about it, and then you can say something when you are allowed to talk. But first of all, you need to listen. Listening requires one to pay full attention to what the other person is saying and understanding his or her feelings and emotions. That's the reason the poet says here, when I ask you to listen to me, you start giving me advice. That means you haven't done what I have told you. And when I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't be feeling that way or I should be feeling this way, that means you don't have value for my feelings. Here the poet speaks like a teenager addressing his elders. The poet complains that if he asks someone to listen to him and the person starts advising him, then he or she is not doing what exactly is asked of him or her. When the poet asks his listener to listen to him and he or she begins to tell the poet to not to feel that way, the way he is thinking or the way he is feeling, or that is not fair. This is not what is expected from a listener, the poet says. So in this way, the listener crushes the feelings of a speaker. That means there is no value for the feelings of the speaker. Let's read next stanza. When I ask you to listen to me and you feel you have to do something to solve my problem, you have failed me, strange as that may seem. So the poet says that if he asks somebody to listen to him and the other person tries to do something to solve his problem, then there is something wrong with the listener. So here the poet again tries to explain it in a deeper sense, saying that when I as a speaker, when I as a first person, I want someone to listen to me, and if that person tries to do something to solve my problem, it means actually he did not understand what trauma, what problem I am going through, and he is trying to fix the problem, whereas I as a speaker do not expect him to solve the problem, rather to listen to my voice. So here you can understand, children, when the person sitting in next or sitting in front tries to solve your problem which you do not expect, this is something strange. Let's begin with the next answer. Listen. All I ask is that you listen. Don't talk or do, just hear me. Advice is cheap. 20 cents will get you both Dear Abby and Billy Graham in the same newspaper. So here the poet says that it is surprising to see a listener behaving that way. According to the poet, listening is merely paying attention to the speaker's thoughts and feelings. That's the reason the poet says, all I want from you is to listen to me. Don't talk or do anything, only listen to me. So he says, it is quite easy to get an advice. Yes, advice is so cheap. You just have to throw money and advice will be given to you. Piece of or bits of advice is ready to be given to you. So he says you can get advice on simply because it is too cheap. You can get it only throwing 20 cents. You will get the advice by Dear Abby and Billy Graham in the same newspaper. Children, I have already given the reference about this while reading the glossary words. So let me explain it again about Dear Abby and Billy Graham. These are preachers, and to every problem there is solution that is given by these people. Abby is also like that. She always gives like preaching. She does preaching work. So people go to her, and even through her preaching, even through her programs where preaching is done. And also about Billy Graham, who is most favorable person amongst Christianity, because he tries his level best to bring Roman Catholics as well as Protestants together. He tried to bring unity between them. So always these preachers have given their preaching, have given their suggestions and advices. So it is so cheap. You will get it throwing some money. You will get all kinds of advices. It is so cheap. So the poet says all he wants someone to listen to him or offer ears to what he says. Next answer. And I can do for myself. I am not helpless. Maybe discouraged and faltering, but not helpless. When you do something for me that I can and need to do for myself, you contribute to my fear and inadequacy. The poet beautifully explains this, that sometimes you just have to, someone has to lend his or her ears to you what you feel like speaking or talking to. That's it. It doesn't mean that you really need help, that you really need to be helped by someone. So beautifully he says that I can do for myself things where I am able to do myself. I am not helpless. I can help myself very, very well. Only the thing is that maybe sometimes I am discouraged. Sometimes I am faltering. But definitely I am not helpless. So the poet says that when someone does something which can be managed by my own self, by the poet himself, doing so, someone tries, actually contributes to fear and inadequacy of the poet. It means that the poet says that he might be a little depressed, but definitely not helpless. The poet further exemplifies by saying Suppose if a child asks his parents to listen to him or her, the parents are expected to pay attention to his feelings or thoughts, isn't it? The parents are not supposed to to give suggestions. If the parents start doing something for the child which the child can do for himself, then they make the situation worse, because things that are managed by the child himself, if these things are done by the poet, definitely the condition of the child will be more miserable. So they should make an effort to understand the child's feelings, no matter how baseless or foolish they seem. So even irrational feelings have meaning if one tries to understand the reason behind them. So here the poet warns others, rather someone, to understand him, not to judge him, not to give solutions, not to fix his problem, but rather only to pay attention to what he says. Next stanza. But when you accept as a simple fact that I feel what I feel, no matter how irrational, then I can stop trying to convince you and get about this business of understanding what's behind this irrational feeling. And when that's clear, the answers are obvious and I don't need advice. So here the poet says, actually he tries to tell someone, maybe his friend, maybe his elderly person, that even if his feelings are irrational, maybe from the other's point of view it must be meaningless, still when I'm trying to make you understand about my feelings, you must listen to them. I can stop trying to convince you, no matter how irrational, but when I feel like explaining, when I feel like sharing my feelings, you must listen to it. Next stanza. Irrational feelings make sense when we understand what's behind them. Perhaps that's why prayers work sometimes for some people, because God is mute and He doesn't give advice or try to fix things. So again here, so beautifully, the poet idealizes. He idealizes God as the great listener, for He always silently listens to the prayers of His believers without giving any advice. Does God provide you any advice, children? No. He's a silent listener. That's the reason the poet says that God is a great listener, and that's what this godly quality has to be inculcated, imbibed amongst all of us. So he says, He silently listens to the prayers of His believers without giving any advice. So it is better to lend your ears to people who wish to express their feelings and emotions without trying to fix anything. Let's start the concluding stanza. God just listens and lets you work it out for yourself. So please listen and just hear me. And if you want to talk, wait a minute for your turn and I will listen to you. So the poet again emphasizes that everyone should inculcate godly quality of being a good listener. God never ever gives you advices, not a single piece of advice, but He behaves as a great listener. So it is always better to lend your ears to the people who really want to tell you something, those who really want to express their feelings, emotions. But if the listener wants to talk, then the poet asks him or her to wait for a minute and to let his or her turn come. So you need to be patient, children. You need to inculcate this patience also. Sometimes it is lacking in us. So we need to be very patient. Patiently we need to listen to the person. When our own turn comes, that time we should speak. So the poet ends by saying that he will also listen to the readers as a sincere listener, but first of all, he should be allowed to talk to explain, to express his feelings, and then when the turn of the reader will come, he will also listen to him very sincerely for being a good listener. So here children, the poem ends. It mostly it gives more emphasis on being a good listener. So in this very fast life, we all are become so impatient, maybe due to this advanced technology and all other things that are easily accessible to us. We have lost the patience which we used to have earlier. So that's the reason the poet says that be a good listener, please listen. Then only you will understand the feelings of the people in the society, the feelings of others. So children, we have learned the whole poem. Please listen. The name of the poet is not mentioned here, so it is unknown. After learning the poem, what you need to do is textbook warming up and workshop activities sincerely. Along with that, you need to do poetic devices like rhyming words, rhyming scheme, figures of speech, and then write poetic appreciation. Hope this explanation part will help you learning this poem in a better way. Thank you.